Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. Hunters and campers of Reddit. What's the most unexplainable thing you've seen while out in the forest? Please remember to like, share, hype, listen and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe. Found a few odd things in a few areas. For reference, I was at least a few hundred miles away from any roads or really any civilization at all. I found a rusty old Volkswagen Beetle, flipped on its top, driver's door missing, no keys in it either. Inside was weather-worn and ripped up by wildlife, strange things in the distance away from any roads or trails, and the fact that the trees around it are too close together for it to have driven in there. And those trees have to be at least almost 200 years old by the size. Older than the car. Farther into the woods was a log cabin. Door busted open and the whole place ransacked. Left side of it burned on the interior near the fireplace. I still don't have any idea what happened there, or if the car and the ransacked cabin are connected, or what. People in the few nearest towns knew nothing when I brought it up. Once I was camping in a very, very remote part of the Nevada desert. I was asleep and was awakened by something that sounded like the sand people in Star Wars movies. Howling, caterwauling. Weird, irregular footsteps very close by scared the living shit out of me. My dog, a chihuahua, lost her mind. We were covered in the truck all night long. Woke up to find the truck surrounded by donkey hoof prints and a pack of about 15 donkeys grazing gracefully all around us. They were super cute and not aggressive. I had no idea they made it sound like this though. Heard voices filing past my truck while I was camping in Monongahela National Forest near Davis, West Virginia. Woke up to what sounded like 10 to 15 people, a mix of men, women, and children, walking down the road, having hushed conversations. It seemed like they knew I was there and were trying not to wake me, talking too low to understand what they were saying. There was also an orange glow coming through the fog. Figured they were hikers marching down to a trailhead, and the glow was the sun coming up. When I looked at my phone, though, I saw that it was just a little after 3 a.m. Also saw that the light was moving, like lanterns or torches being carried. Also realized that there were no trails in that direction. This obviously startled me, and I sat up suddenly in my cot. Must have shook the truck a little because the voices all hushed each other up and went silent. I sat there in the silence as the light also slowly faded out. Did not go back to sleep and left as soon as the sun actually did come up. I've since camped there again many times without incident. While hunting one year as a younger guy, my dad and I saw this purple and white light above the tree line that dropped altitude at an extremely high speed, then shot straight back up into the sky and sped off faster than anything from this earth could possibly move. It was absolutely wild and has stuck with me my entire life. I remember it as vividly as the day it happened. I've also come across two, what I assume to be homeless guys, legitimately butt each other while I was hiking in Missouri. Like, I don't have anything against the gay community by any means, but that shit was absolutely crazy to see. Never once had thought that would be something I saw in my lifetime, lol. The forest holds many secrets. I was camping in the mountains, no service. I saw 30 Starlink satellites traveling in a straight path through the night sky. I had no idea what they were. This was right after when they first started launching them, so it wasn't well known yet. I was so confused, thinking, what the is that? Like, there has to be an explanation for that, I think, lol. The next morning around 8 a.m. I started a hike into a canyon. Nice, bright, sunny day, so I had my sunglasses on. I also didn't know about a solar eclipse that covered about 80% of the sun, peaking at 9:30 a.m. When I took off my glasses around 9:20 a.m., Right as I was getting to the river, I instantly noticed the dim lighting, like I still had sunglasses on. I started looking around, wondering what the again, rubbing my eyes to make sure it wasn't real. I tried looking toward the sun, but it was still too bright to look at it. I just stood there and thought about the lights the night before, and now this is going on. I was like, what the is really going on? Like, am I screwed or what? Did World War III start? Maybe there really is aliens and shit. I was freaked out a little bit. Wasn't sure what to think about the last 24 hours. I said to myself, well, I'm going to finish and going fishing, and I don't give a shit. It wasn't till later that day when I got back to civilization and everything was explained, lol. When I was just out of high school, I had gone on a lake trip with a bunch of friends, drinking, smoking cigars, and just general debauchery. The second night we were there, as we were hanging around the fire, we started to notice a weird sound coming from the opposite side of the lake. There was literally nobody around. Hadn't seen another person since we got there. One of the guys said it sounded like drums. Two other guys, and maybe myself, decided we'd go exploring to see what it was. We walked about 2 miles around the lake. No paths, thick woods all around. We came to a slight opening in the trees and stopped. The sound had been getting louder and clearer the whole way. It was definitely the sound of drums, just a steady 1, 2, 3 beat. As we walked into the clearing, we saw a rock ledge jutting out of the ground. Nothing else around. This was weird in itself, but combined with the drumming coming from nowhere and the clearing that didn't make sense, we were cautious. It sounded like the drums were coming from the rock. We got to about 20 feet from the rock, and out of nowhere, the speed of the drums doubled. A massive wind came out of nowhere. I turned around to see the other two guys running away. Didn't even think. I chased after them. We ran all the way back to the camp. By the time we made it back, the wind was screaming and rain had started. It sounded like the entire forest was falling down around us. The other guys had been running around trying to get chairs, trash, and tarps all secured. Shit was flying everywhere. We all dove into the giant army-style tent we had set up just to try and keep it away from blowing away. Once inside, we told the other guys what had happened. They said about 45 minutes after we left, a wind started. They had heard the drums increase tempo right before the wind started as well. We ended up hunkered down in a tent all night. The storm was insane. In the morning, we decided to get back and see if there was any sign of the people who were drumming all night. We hiked back to the clearing with the rock. After 20 minutes of searching the area, we found nothing. No drums, no signs of people at all. We wandered around the entire area. There were no roads, trails, or clearings other than the one with the rock. Zero explanation for the sound. Whenever we got home, a friend did some research at a local library. Turns out the lake we were at was a stopping point on the Trail of Tears. Multiple reports of strange occurrences at that lake. Couldn't find anything about phantom drums, but it fit with the odd occurrences. Haven't been back, and this was like 20-something years ago. Alright guys, a couple of shout-outs here. Also, thanks for replying to my comment yesterday. I got some good topics coming up for you in the week to come. But for today, want to just shout out to Amog Narain from Kanpur, India. One of our owners is from India as well. Also, you don't go there. There's your shout out, my friend. And Lost 6872, a very happy 34th birthday today. Again, if you want to hear anything special, just reach out to us in the comments. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. And later on, the last story today is, it talks about the Sierra Nevada mountains in Northern California. It's a beautiful part of the country. I spent about 6 weeks there in the late 90s and highly recommend it. Beautiful. 1998. I was solo hunting for the first time. My dad was in a stand about a mile away. It's about 8 a.m. and a dog walks up to me. He's a pointer, really sweet and just seems lost. We're about 25 minutes from civilization, so there's a decent amount of people in the woods as the season just started. I walked over with the dog, following to my dad's stand. After he was done bitching at me about scaring him off, I explain, and we leave to home and call his number on the caller. The weird part is, when we called the number, the man had lost his dog. He was a trained scent dog who had ran off, and he had never run off before. Only I was hunting in Illinois. This man lived in Michigan, and he had lost the dog 4 days ago. I still have no idea how that dog appeared in the woods that day. The man paid for his dog to be transported back to him, according to my dad. To clarify, I was hunting near Amboy, Illinois, and this man lived in northern Michigan. There is no way he could have ran. And I can't even see theft as a scenario, but I guess that's possible. I.e., maybe another hunter stole him in Michigan and tried using him in Illinois. Camping in a forest, southwest England. I like to get up early when camping and walk around listening to the day before humans really start. It was a dense forest, many pretty little sun-draped glades. I came to one and noticed there was no birdsong and no breeze. That usually means a predator, and being England, we don't really have any dangerous predators. I wondered if we might be lucky enough to see something interesting, a bird of prey, a fox. Then the weird bit. The sound of rushing air, and it felt like a truck or train passed inches in front of me. That same feeling of a lot of air being displaced by something very unstreamlined passing quickly in front of you, enough to physically push me a few inches backwards and force me to catch my footing. It lasted seconds, and everything was silent again before the forest slowly returned to normal birdsong. I spent years commuting into London on trains, standing on train platforms as the 120-mile-per-hour expresses passed, and that's exactly what it felt like. I have 2 stories that have scared the piss out of me. First story, this takes place in Arizona. My friend and I were camping with my family. My family was inside our 5th wheel, and we took a tent because we knew we were going to be loud at night, laughing and stuff. My family went to bed, and we sat around the campfire for a bit, just talking, and all of a sudden we hear laughing just over a hill near us. Not coyotes. We've heard those before. Not javelina, since those weren't in the area. No wolves either. We run off and get into our tent and lay down to watch a movie on my phone, and all of a sudden, she tells me to shut up, and we go dead silent, and you could very faintly hear footsteps, and then a shadow pass over a light on the outside. Never knew what it was. Second story, in Glamis, California. First, may I state, Glamis is very known for thieves, and there's lots of money out there. It was about 2 to 3 a.m., and everyone, including me, was asleep. There's a train that runs out there, but I can always sleep through that. But this wasn't a train. Someone started to pound, and I mean like HOA mad, at you for 1 inch of grass over the pound on the door, which is very uncommon. This woke me up immediately, and my mom woke up. I fell back asleep because I wasn't sure what I heard. I didn't think much of it. The next morning I walk out and stand to my dirt bike had been moved to underneath one of our windows, like someone tried to peek in. I have a few more as we go camping a lot, but these are my most memorable. My friends and I were road tripping through Kentucky during a winter break. For one of the campsites we stayed at, we scored this beautiful spot where, in the leafless season, you could see right through the woods to the river and the lovely hillside across it. We get there a little before sunset. We set up camp, making sure our tent doors were all facing opposite the setting sun, so we could wake up to the light and warmth of the sunshine. Except the next morning, the sun rose on the same horizon it set, and not even like slightly less than directly opposite, as it often does. This sunrise was within about 45 degrees visual guesstimate of the previous sunset, as in the sun rose over the same hillside it set behind. I mean, I know there's got to be some science-y reason for it, but we absolutely could not wrap our heads around it, and I probably still can't. I used to live near a bunch of woods and would explore with my friends all the time. Some weird shit happened there though. One time we were walking and found a slide in the middle of the woods with tore up stuffed animals all around it. It looked like blood streaked down it, so we ran, thinking maybe an animal or some killer or something were responsible. I got curious and came back the next day. The blood was just still water and rust that had turned red. Still, I have no clue how it got back there, stuffed animals too, and why it was standing perfectly, not like it was dumped back there. We also found a big-ass boat back there, weathered by the elements and animals, also filled with that red still water that looks like blood. We also found a boating license under it that was dated back 1983. There was this big cabin deep in the woods that was so hard to find, but it was fully abandoned. It looked like it had been since the 20s. Still, there were old food in jars, antique chairs, random toys everywhere. Looked like everything was left the same for years, but the entire floor was covered in dust and leaves. The kicker is there was a cow near the cabin, by himself, at this abandoned cabin in the woods. He was fully black, and his face was white, so we called him Scully, because he would watch us from the woods when we got close to the cabin, and he looked like a floating skull. The whole thing was so confusing. Everything was miles apart. It's not like it could be someone's abandoned property in the woods, plus everything was aged so differently. Cabin from the 20s, boat from the 80s, slide and toys from the early 2000s, so bizarre. Only a few of my friends would go there with me. The rest were too sketched out. I was walking my dog along the road late at night when I see a dog in the middle of the street. I get worried and slowly approach it so I can see if it has a collar. It darts away into the trees. I let my dog take the lead and follow him as he sniffs deeper into the woods. In the pitch black, I hear what I think is a recording of opera music. As we walk farther, I can tell it's an actual person singing. I can see a single red light shining through the trees. As we approach it, I can make out what looks like a one-room cabin. It's pitch black, and we're too far away to be illuminated by the light. We get a little closer. The voice stops mid-phrase and the light goes out. I get spooked, convinced someone knows I'm nearby, doesn't want to be found, and go tearing through the woods perpendicular to where we came. We burst through the tree line into a graveyard. I go back in the daylight to find the dog, and where we entered the woods was gone. Out hunting near 100 Mile House. Clear night, all the stars, few of my buddies all around the fire. I had recently put a new 18x scope on my rifle, high-powered clear glass. We brought it out, praising its clarity, and found we could quite clearly see the craters and outlines of the moon on the highest zoom setting when finally it happened. 4, what appeared to be, very bright stars in a formation of a compass, one for each direction. We all stopped and gazed and wondered what the hell those could be. Couple minutes after debate, they simultaneously moved down, and a final long stretch to the left, incredibly fast. Nothing humans were capable of. No burn trail, no nothing. I've never been a believer in UFOs until that night, and I wasn't alone. I'll never forget what I saw, and it opened my perspective to what could be out there. I was somewhere in the Green Swamp Wilderness area many years ago in a campground that was basically nothing more than a big field next to an abandoned town. The little town had a cemetery and a couple of old houses and a church that you could view during the day. It was maybe 10 p.m., and I was enjoying a cigarette by my truck when I noticed across the field another camper was having a hard time. He kept getting into his vehicle and readjusting it, so the headlights were pointing in different directions. I figured it was meth-related. What an oddball thing to do so late at night. That area was pretty known for it at the time, until I saw what he was seeing. I couldn't make out what exactly it was, but it was as a little taller than his pop-up camper, with the roof extended, mind you. I only saw it for a couple of seconds before it ran off into the woods. I barely slept. I kept thinking I was hearing the thing walk around my campsite, in the middle of the night. I live in a camper surrounded by woods. A couple of nights ago, around 3 a.m., I was trying very hard to sleep and a loud, weird noise startled me. Normally, my AC would drown out the outside noise, but it's been cold, so only had my not noisy space heater on. The noise was like a screech scream. Like, think of an owl or eagle screech that morphs into a scream. It didn't sound human, but was unsettling. We haven't had any mountain lions reported here, probably due to the lack of mountains. But there's no big cat situation. We have foxes and maybe coyotes, but I've never seen one. So I'm straining my ears to decipher this weird yell, and then I hear the unmistakable sound of one of the roosters, Ducky cockadoodling. And then the creepy sound again, then Ducky. I go out onto my front deck for a better listen and realize Ducky is having a crow-off with some other roo who knows where through the woods on another farm, and that someone's rooster has an extremely horror monster-sounding crow. I don't know what they were saying to each other, but then another roo joined in, and I gave up on sleep. About 20 years ago, I went camping with my girlfriend, wife now, off the Appalachian Trail in North Georgia mountains. We camped about 100 yards off a fire road, which we drove up in my truck. I had firewood in the bed of my truck. I chose not to haul to the campsite. I noticed just before dark the quantity of firewood seemed lower than I remembered. I thought nothing of it at the time, as we were a 45-minute drive from anywhere, and was fairly certain there were no other hikers or campers close by. Nearing midnight, I decided to get a couple more pieces of wood. My wife was not comfortable being alone in the woods, so she walked to the truck with me. There was no moon that night, so I grabbed my flashlight. As it was completely dark, I also grabbed my gun. My wife asked me more than once if a gun was really necessary. When we got to my truck, we heard rustling about 20 feet away in the fire road. I shined my light in that direction, and we see a middle-aged man and two teenaged boys. They were filthy with tattered clothes, certainly no hikers. There was also no homes for miles. Think of the movie Deliverance. The man asked, "Y'all got any sticks?" I replied, "Nope," grabbed the last couple pieces of wood and returned to our campsite. I told my wife within their earshot, that's why I brought a gun. Never saw nor heard them again. My family and I were camping on a remote ski hill in summertime. A friend was getting married on the property the next day. We were the only people on the hill this day, as we arrived early to greet vendors the following morning. My husband had to whip into town for something, leaving my 10-month-old son and I alone. My son was napping in the tent when I suddenly felt all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up and had an overwhelming feeling not to let him out of my sight. Then I heard what I can only describe as a language similar to those click tribes in Africa, like Xhosa or something, but even more clicking. This was in the middle of nowhere British Columbia, Canada. I've been camping literally my entire life, and I've never heard, before or since, heard anything like it. It surrounded us birds calling from every direction. It was absolutely terrifying, and all I could think to do was turn on a podcast I had downloaded, no service, super loud on my phone to make it seem like there were more people around. Shortly after I turned on, the voices stopped, and I never heard it again. I truly wish I had thought to record it, because even when I tried to explain it to my husband later that day, he just looked at me like I was nuts. Had plenty weird things happen in the forest. Weirdest was in the winter, cutting holly on an estate, came across an area surrounded by high rhododendron bushes, plenty large holly and beech trees in the center. Managed to cut a path through and started to cut and bag holly when a guy appeared from behind a tree wearing a dressing gown, said nothing, just walked past and gone behind the next tree. Now, trees were all clumped together, about a meter apart, and from where he came was a mass of bushes, which, seeing as I had to cut a path through, and made as much noise as possible, he made no noise, not even a branch snapping. Even the route he walked past me was a mass of bramble bushes and trees. I climbed the holly tree for a better view of the surroundings, and there was no way out. A screech owl scared me to death when I was about 8 years old. It made a very loud sound like a woman getting tortured and painfully murdered. My grandparents' ancestral home was way out in the country, very rural. People still practice witchcraft and voodoo in the area. My great-uncle lived by himself on the property, which was way up the road of a dirt driveway. Over the years, old oak trees had grown over the house and property. Even midday was dark. So this was pretty late in the evening, well past dark, and it was pitch black outside. I was with my grandmother, checking in on her crazy brother. He used kerosene lamps for lighting, so that old house was big spooky. When that bird screeched, I went into shock from fright. My grandmother and her brother had a big laugh at my expense. Around 40 years ago, I followed a neighbor and his son that was around my age, but lived in another city with his mom, so I had never met him, to the Swedish mountains for some fishing and camping. They had been there many times, and the dad had been there long before the son was born. This place was not allowed to be camping at, but being so off-grid, and the times they'd been there, they thought it would be okay. Right after we parked the car, one of the locals complained about it wasn't a place for tourists. The dad told him that we were just going to go to the river and look at the waterfall. So the local just grunted and went away. We took our gear and started walking. After many hours, we arrived to a beautiful plateau with a bunch of small ponds, some only a couple of meters apart. We set up the tents and settled in, made a fire, and just relaxed. It was around midsummer, so the sun was up 24 hours. No big trees were growing there at this altitude, just bushes and mountain birch, which gave us a long view area. One part of the area was very stony or rocky and probably a leftover from the last ice age. We started to fish and had a great few hours. The dad went to sit by the fire and have a drink. It was in the middle of the night, but we weren't tired, so we went to explore some of the ponds a bit away, and all of a sudden we saw a person completely dressed in white and silver, Laplander clothes. We didn't see the face, and the person looked like it hovered or floated over the stony parts and was coming our way. It disappeared behind the bigger rocks that showed up again. We thought it was some of the locals that were mad at us for camping at the place, so we hid behind a rock and were too afraid to look. The kid said it must be a ghost, and I was like, "What do you mean?" He explained he had been experiencing them all his life. After some time, we had to look away, and it was gone, and the dad had fallen asleep. We woke him up, asking what the person wanted, and he got all white in the face and said he didn't see anyone. I noticed he knew what it was, but didn't say anything. We went to sleep, and after some hours, we heard hundreds of reindeer move fast past the trees and tents. Sounded like a train passing. Next day, the dad was really stressed, and we ate a quick breakfast, and he said we need to pack up and leave, even though we had planned to stay for several days. He didn't say why, but we packed in a hurry and left. After many hours, we arrived at the car, and it was like a mountain had been lifted from its shoulders. He looked at us and said, "This is something you're never going to talk about again, do you understand?" We both looked at each other and said yes, even though I really didn't know what had happened exactly. Was it an old mountain ghost just looking at what we were up to make sure we didn't destroy any land? Who knows? But we didn't talk about it again because the kid moved and I have not seen him since. In Northern California, there was a footpath behind the high school that led out to the woods that me nor any of my friends had taken while attending. Later, in my mid-20s, I asked several friends if they wanted to go check it out. None wanted to go, so I went alone, thinking I knew where I would lead. Along the way, I pass an old shack the size of an outhouse about a mile in. Weird, but whatever. About another mile, I reached this clearing, which is not what I expected, but once I looked around, I totally knew where I was in relation to town. Except, there was this collection of really old construction-type vehicles, like 1950s old and humongous, rusted and abandoned. So I go about climbing the ladder up to the top of these machines and can see my whole town. As I'm looking around, I see the most adorable young mountain lion barreling down a small ridge, all flippity-floppity, about 50 yards, coming toward me. And for a few seconds, I felt like Snow White admiring nature, until my brain kicked in and began panicking about where its mother was. As a fireman slid down the ladder from the equipment I was on, I took off in a sprint, just in time to see her about 50 yards behind me. I'm fit but not athletic, and that day was the first and only day I have ever ran so fast in my entire life. I ran so fast I could hear the wind whistling through the hoop earrings I normally wore, up the ridge past the shack and finally to the lawn where I started, the whole way hearing the ground rustling behind me. Not sure how, but our janitor was already out of his maintenance office with his rifle pointed in my direction as I bolted out of the wilderness, and I swear I ran right into him. After I puked, which I had to hose down out of sheer gratefulness, he was able to tell me he could hear the ruckus and wasn't sure what to expect, but he saw the mountain lion stop as I crossed onto the lawn. When I told him how I found the abandoned construction equipment a couple of miles out, he had no idea what I was talking about. Many years later, I went again with a friend, and the equipment was gone, and I can't fathom how it was moved because of their size, location, and condition, without our whole town knowing about such a big project to remove them. Once two friends and I, in young naivete, cycled into the Great Smokies National Park with a metric ton of beer in our packs and hiked a few miles into the trail and only set up camp when rain started. We had seen some beers on the way in. The rain turned into snow, but thankfully we had a nice fire we had built that worked like a furnace, thanks to a strong wind blowing all night long. We didn't sleep much in our tent due to the cold and wind, but all night long we kept feeling the ground shake as if a mama bear was jumping up and down right outside our tent. After a miserable night of just short dozing off for a while, morning came and we broke down our campsite to walk out. And every 100 yards we found a downed tree, 100 feet tall and many tons heavy, that had fallen all night long, but just not on us. It was 40 years ago, and the tree, the three of us, still talk about our dumb luck to still be walking the earth. Approximately 25 years ago in the California Sierra Nevadas, my brother and I went camping. I couldn't tell you exactly where because my brother closed the spot, but I remember it being Eagle's Nest or something. All I know is that we had no business being up there in the vehicles we took. It was an exceptionally long and slow journey up the mountain, but it was gorgeous. Giant trees, granite everywhere, lush valleys, clean air, and blue skies for days. It was a deer camp all the way, but we were pretty green about deer hunting. Whatever, it was a chance to stretch our legs and rifles. We set up camp on a flat spot between a bend in the road and a dry creek bed. After getting the tent up, we explored the area, did some rock scrambling, and got our bearings. Nothing looked out of the ordinary, but I did notice a very large, deadish-looking tree near the creek. I think it stuck out to me because it looked soft, almost termite-ridden soft, and very crumbly. Nature's neat, but whatever. It's time for beers by the fire. Middle of the night, I'm instantly awoken with a ground-shaking boom. My sleeping brain heard the incident, but my awake brain was dealing with the consequences. I figured it was an animal by the tent, but I didn't hear breathing or footsteps. Regardless, I laid in my sleeping bag, straight up petrified. I didn't know what happened, but my hair was standing on end. My ears were overworking and misinterpreting every sound, and I felt paralyzed. Eventually, and who knows how long later, I fell back asleep. Nobody else in my tent was aware of oddly alert, so I figured it was just me. The next morning, when the sun rose, I cautiously approached my brothers and asked if they heard anything. They mentioned and mumbled, yeah, kind of. Maybe, definitely, not how I remembered it. So I started walking in larger and larger concentric circles, trying to discover what made me freak out. As I approached the creek bed, everything was covered in bits of redwood. Here, there, everywhere. Oh my god, no, really? Could that have happened? Yes, it had. The redwood fell over in the middle of the night, happened to align with the creek bed, and literally exploded on the granite boulders. It was pure luck that it fell the direction and not ours. It was also pure terror that it landed on boulders and blew up, and didn't land softly in the forest where its fall could have been cushioned by other trees. I immediately went and got my brother and a laser rangefinder from my hunting kit, and we talked about it. It was exactly 100 yards from our tent. I now feel comfort in knowing the answer to the philosophical question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Yeah, we were there, but I can assure you, it definitely makes a huge ing sound.